Well, what a way to end the show, right? Just finished episode 8 of Defenders. Still liked it. I liked the way things were going. And did it on a huge cliffhanger. There was a huge surprise, one big surprise. I'm just going to go through an order of things that I thought were interesting and that I noticed. And I'll start with the biggest one. Well, not the biggest one, but the one that kind of came first to mind. In my last video about Defenders, I spoke too soon. I mentioned how Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, was kind of a muted presence and the other Defenders stood out more than him. That changes a lot in the later episodes. His character comes to the forefront in a lot more prominence. He's kind of sort of emerges as the Defenders team leader, and he has, that sacrifice at the end, or attempted sacrifice. He sacrifices himself when the building explodes in Midland Circle, and everyone thinks he's dead, but of course he pops up at the end of the episode in like some nunnery or monastery or whatever, and no one knows he's there. At least none of the other Defenders know, but they all think he's dead, and so do Karen and Foggy. So, Matt Murdock, his character goes through a mini story arc in the show, and it's a big one that plays a huge role in the ending. And of course, there's his scenes with Elektra at the end, him trying to make her realize that she's, a good person, or trying to make her see the good in herself, and that she's not just the black sky. I don't really know if it worked. And where Elektra is at the end, we don't see anything of her, but I doubt we see the last of her either. So Matt Murdock and Daredevil is key in this show. And it looks like Iron Fist is going to try to take his place to sub in, because, Matt left him that message, protect my city, and it looks like Iron Fist is taking that literally, and that's probably going to lead into Iron Fist 2. Or if they do a Power Man, a Luke Cage and Iron Fist 2, or just a Luke Cage and Iron Fist show to mirror, the partnership and the friendship those characters have in the Marvel comics. I don't know what they're going to do, what Marvel and Netflix's plans are with Power Man and Luke Cage, or with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. I'm sure they know, but, they haven't let us know yet. And that leads me to my next character in question, Iron Fist. Also in the last video, I talked about how in the first 4 episodes of Defenders, Iron Fist, just like in his own show, didn't seem to have that much mastery over his actual glowing fist, his super move that he uses in his fights. But in this show, by the end of Defenders, it looks like it's an evolution or a maturation of his understanding of it. In his final fight with Elektra, he's able to make it glow longer, sustain it, and it looks like he's mastering it more and more and more, and they're being conscious of the fact that he's learning how to use his power. And I like it. It looks like this Iron Fist is growing in to become the kind of Iron Fist he's usually been portrayed as in the Marvel Comics, as someone who's, very competent and confident in his fighting abilities and has mastery over his glowing fist, his chi. And I think the show is trying to show that he's getting there. He's not there yet, but they're conscious. And they're not writing him as inexperienced just because they have a plan. And I like that. And that's very great for him. And, more power to them. And to, whatever they plan on doing with him. It seems like they have a direction, they know where to go with him, which is great. I also hope that, when they kind of, forcibly in the middle of the show, I guess imprisoned Danny and knocked him out and tied him up in that chair, Luke Cage, came to watch him and stand guard over him to make sure he wasn't escaping. And the writers used it as a scene to, I guess, continue the bonding of those characters when Danny was telling him about, his time in Kunlun and how he got his Iron Fist powers by defeating the dragon. And I think it's weird how, so far, every time we hear about Danny and the dragon and how he got his powers, it's exposition and him, showing, telling how that happened, and the show's never shown us that. It would have been nice in Iron Fist Season 1 if they would have spent time in Kunlun, or Kunlun, showing Danny's evolution from Danny Rand into Iron Fist, how he got his powers, how he defeated this dragon, if they'd ever show the dragon. They've never done that, and I think it's because they didn't want to. I think I read articles that the showrunners didn't want to make it seem similar to DC's Arrow by having flashbacks to Danny's time on this island, similar to how on the Arrow show, Oliver Queen, they have flashbacks back to his time on, his mysterious island before he became, the superhero Arrow, and I think they didn't want to do that with Iron Fist. But I think at this point, now they've already established a character of Iron Fist, they really need to show what happened when he was in Kunlun as a younger monk with that dragon and all that stuff, instead of continuing to just tell us what happened. I think it'd just be a bit more awesome and great for the character and the show. And I hope they do that in Iron Fist Season 2 or in Luke Cage Iron Fist, whatever they decide to do. Or Defender Season 2, whenever they want to do it. I hope they do that with him. Marvel and Netflix decided to only do this show in 8 episodes as opposed to, 12 or 13, the way they've done a lot of their previous shows. And that's a good idea because the 8 episode count, I think, forced them to tell the story in a shorter, more quicker kind of way where they can get to the point faster. Iron Fist dragged on because I think they spent too many episodes, and so did Luke Cage, actually. Luke Cage was a better show than Iron Fist, and I enjoyed that a lot better, but it still had pacing problems too because they had so many episodes and they had to stretch things out. And with Defenders, there were times when Defenders, even with 8 episodes, was kind of slow. So if they had that be 13, it would have made the show even worse because they would have had to drag stuff out longer. So I hope that, Marvel and Netflix, as they do more shows with more heroes, that they take a great care in deciding, how many episodes do we actually need to tell this story? Because if they take too many, it's going to just bog down the whole show. But Defenders, I felt, was just the right amount. They maybe even could have done it in 7, but 8 was okay. And I did just mention and talk about, the Luke Cage, Iron Fist, friendship, bro-buddy bonding, which is great because those characters are supposed to be friends, just like in the comics. There was bonding of a different kind in the last episode between Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. They had a moment, and it's totally clear that they still care about each other and have feelings for each other. Not that anyone was ever trying to act like they didn't, but they had moved on essentially. Luke Cage is with Claire now, and Jessica just, parted her own way and is single. But they were together once or hooked up, and it seems like they still have feelings for each other. And Jessica says in their last scene together in this show that, you want to meet for coffee sometime. And I'm wondering if she literally meant coffee or if she meant the other kind of coffee that, the Luke Cage universe means, let's have sex. And, he kind of looked at her like, is that what you mean? Or I don't know, maybe I have to watch it again, but I think that's interesting. And, it does look like that Luke and Jessica might be the end game, just like they are in the comics. And that, Luke and Claire's relationship might eventually end. We'll see. And also, I wanted to talk about Misty Knight. As you know, in the comic books, if you read the Marvel comic books, Misty Knight has a bionic arm. And in the show, of course, Bakuto chops off Misty's arm in the last final fight in the Midland Enterprises building. And she doesn't have it anymore. So she doesn't have her, biological natural arm. So I guess it means, ta-da, in future shows, in whatever series Misty Knight appears in next, she's going to get a bionic arm. And she's going to be a lot more active. And I wonder if they're going to have her hook up with Danny. Because in the comics, Misty Knight and Iron Fist are a couple. So I'm curious if they'll do that in the show too. It does seem kind of out of left field, or would be weird for me, because the Iron Fist and Misty Knight is portrayed in live action. I can't see those two people getting together at all. You never know. I mean, people can surprise you, and if a show wants something to happen, if the writers want something to happen, they'll write it in there. But they just seem like two totally different people who wouldn't really last or be into each other that much right now to me. But, we'll see. The actors could sell it, and maybe so could the writers. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to talk about the huge surprise that even though Sigourney Weaver as Alexandra was the main villain, or at least marketed as the main villain in all the, the promo material for this season, she gets killed, like in episode 6, Elektra kills her off. Surprisingly, when Sigourney Weaver is making that speech, I've led us and I've done all this, and then Elektra basically impales her from the back, from behind, and then chops off her head. I was stunned. I was like, well, that's how they want to surprise us and keep us interested, right? By killing the main villain, surprisingly, in the middle of the show. But now that I think about it, Netflix with the Marvel shows has a tendency to do that. In Luke Cage, the main villain, I think, was Mahershala Ali's character, at least initially, and I think his name was Diamondback. I saw Luke Cage too, I don't remember, but he was the main villain, and then, they killed him off in the middle of the season, and then a new guy emerged as the main villain for Luke Cage after the first villain was killed off. And they did the same sort of thing here in this show with Defenders. And actually, that makes me think of when I posted my episode 1 through 4 review yesterday, or commentary, On Instagram, someone replied and said that they felt that the Marvel Netflix shows were actually formulaic, that they have a certain kind of formula they stick to. And this, the death of Sigourney Weaver's main villain character, which was just like what happened with another main villain in another Marvel Netflix show, made me wonder if maybe, in those writers' rooms, they are kind of following similar patterns or notes, to kind of surprise the audience and keep them interested. And one way is to kill the villain, surprisingly and maybe too early. And I'm wondering, now if that's some kind of a formula they have with these Marvel Netflix shows. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but if it becomes this situation where you can continually predict that this is going to happen in like any Marvel Netflix show, that's kind of bad. So I hope that, if they do have a formula, if that's how they're going to do this, if they kind of stop using this formula sooner rather than later. But all in all, I thought this was a very good show. I liked it a lot. And I'm interested to see where Marvel takes the Netflix show, all the Defenders characters, in the future. And that wraps up my thoughts about Defenders Season 1, Episodes 5 through 8. If you'd like to watch me do more videos about Marvel Netflix TV shows and other awesome Marvel things, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you soon. Bye.